This is the perfect RIA, in case you didn't know. Bringing you all the strategies to help your business grow. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you hanging on the edge of your seat? Sit back and listen in while you feel the beat, yeah! Another myth bites the dust.
Hello, TPR Nation. This is Amber Keem from The Perfect REA. Thank you for joining me on today's Follow-Up Friday, where I'll be covering the highlights and action items from this week's episodes. On Monday's episode, Matt and Micah were talking about taking time out of the office. They discussed how you have to create forcing mechanisms in your life in order to push you to that next level. They noted that when they look at other advisors who aren't taking more time out of the office, they aren't growing as much. And that if you're working constantly, then you're never not working, which means that your productivity just falls. Micah said that when you do that, you're robbing yourself of being able to prioritize and make the right decisions, so you want to be effective with your time. Matt shared that with going on vacation and taking time out of the office, there's psychology around the anticipation of the vacation bringing more reward than the vacation itself, that you end up working at a different level of productivity. Micah brought up Parkinson's law with the example of how many times have you forgotten to pack your suitcase? We're guessing never. You have a limited time to get it done, and therefore you get it done. You can apply this to so many other things as well. Matt shared 3 approaches to being gone from the office, which is when you return, the office hasn't burned down, or it's about the same as when you left, or lastly, the office is better than before you left. He said that you have to be intentional about those second and third approaches, but if you want things to be better upon your return, you have to communicate those expectations with your team and have KPIs. Now, a big part of you being able to get away from the office has to do with your team and their concerns and the importance of fear setting. The guy said you can't skip that step of fear setting with your team when you're leaving, especially when you're going to be off the grid for an extended period of time. Micah said this isn't about your fears. This is about your team's fears, and you need to walk through this with your team, and you can't dismiss their what-ifs. You have to walk through all of this with them. They said part of that is empowering your team with a communication plan as well, and also letting your clients know that you'll be unavailable. By doing that, you're setting those expectations, and your clients are fine as long as they know that they're being taken care of and that someone is available for them. The guys also recommended that you should be doing the same fear setting with your family. For Matt, he'll discuss this with his wife, what he needs to do to get to the level that he feels he needs to be at. And Micah talked through this with his wife for a recent trip that they had for things that he could have planned or ready for if he wasn't in a good headspace. Those things would then allow him to get back into the right headspace. And they also talked about what are those signs. Now, going back to what you want the office to look like when you return, if your goal is to have it better, Matt and Micah talked about what needs to be in place for this to happen. Micah said his mindset needs to be that it won't be perfect. He has to give things a range and he has to set expectations. He said he needs to empower the team to do things that they can fully do, and he'll make sure that he leaves a project for the team to conquer. And he also says you want to make sure that you're giving this information in advance so that the team can come back and ask questions. Matt added that the instructions need to be clear, as well as how they're going to measure success, and they have to be projects that can happen without you. The guys wrapped up by talking about taking care of your team and meeting with them on their vacations. And they also addressed the concern that they've heard from some advisors that they feel that their team will be resentful if they take vacation. They said that if you have a team member who's resentful, then that's not someone who you want on your team. Let's get into action items from Monday's episode. You need to have the dates of your next vacation on the calendar. This needs to be at least a 2-week vacation. Once you do that, book the flight and make it non-refundable. That'll force you to go and actually make this happen. Then do your fear setting so you can start addressing those concerns. On this week's What Works Wednesday, Matt was joined by author Denise Logan. Denise is a former mental health professional and a former attorney who now works with business owners and advisors to help them navigate the emotional obstacles of letting go when it's time to sell their business. Denise said that the time when we leave our work is not just a transaction, that it's the single largest emotional transition in an adult's life. She talked about the first question that people are usually asked whenever they go somewhere, which is, what do you do? She believes that it's a social pecking question, and that the answer you give determines whether you're above or below the person who's asking. So Denise gave homework for when someone asks you that question. She said to answer with something other than how you make your money. She said it's about shifting the dynamic, and it's a reminder that you too will leave your work one day. This goes for everyone, and it'll either be voluntary or involuntary. But she said we live our lives as if we know exactly when that time will be. Matt and Denise talked about how this looks for younger advisors when they're seeing that other people are dropping out of a multi-generational firm. Denise said you want to think about whether you're younger or you're older, think about how you would want to leave your practice. How would you make that exit? And then launch that conversation with senior advisors in the firm. She said when she's working with a business owner, she tells them the best way to choose an advisor is to ask them what is their exit strategy. Because if not, then they haven't gone through that emotional aspect of leaving. Denise talked about how for a business owner who's selling, their business is like the last child leaving the nest. The difference is that most empty nesters have other people who are going through similar things at the same time. But for the business owner, they're going through this virtually alone, and people don't really talk about it. Denise recommends that you think about what does work provide for you other than money and financial security, and make a list of 15 distinct things outside of that. She wrapped up by sharing, you're going to have to really dig deep to think about where you'll be getting all of those things once you leave that business. Because she said you're unlikely to find one single thing once you leave that will meet all of those needs. Let's get into action items from Wednesday's episode. Make that list of 15 things, and then go to Denise's website, deniselogan.com, and purchase her book, The Seller's Journey. On this week's Worlds to Conquer, Jamie talked about what happens when things go wrong in your office. Jamie started her episode by talking about mistakes that advisors make once they start bringing new people on, where they do minimal training and then they trust the person to do the job just as effectively as if it were you. She said no one will ever run your business like you would. Also, that you need to trust your instincts, and that if your gut is saying that things are going wrong, then they probably are. So anytime you're feeling this, you need to bring the team together to discuss it. She said the worst thing that would happen is that you're wrong. When Jamie does this, she doesn't bring all the team members in and tell them that they're doing a bad job and that she doesn't trust them. She said she goes in as a humble leader and lets them know that she's been worried and has doubts and worries. From there, the team will then see what they can do. She said to think about when is the last time that you took some of that intuition feeling and addressed this with your team. Jamie said when things are going wrong, most business owners ignore that feeling because they don't want to micromanage. But it's your business. So when things get off track, she said you've either ignored your intuition or you didn't ask the questions and you assumed that things were going correctly. So how do you come up with a plan when something goes wrong? She said first, you need to triage. Stop the bleeding. You want to get your team together and ask what is the problem, and they need to identify what the problem is in one sentence. And then from there, you can start problem solving. Jamie said the one hard rule for team members when they've made a mistake is that everyone needs to pause and stop taking action. She gave an example of if you receive a client complaint in an email or letter. She said, give yourself some distance from that complaint so that you don't make things worse. And that allows you to give yourself that perspective so you can move forward in the best possible way. The second step is understanding what are the symptoms and what are the underlying conditions. She said a lot of the times the symptoms is a frustration, but she said make sure that you're identifying both. And think about how you're solving things, and you have to get out in front of it. Then you need to revisit and go into problem-solving mode. Jamie said that all of this should come down to a process, and that a lot of times when things go off track, it's because you didn't have a strategy and you didn't convey things to a client. She said you need to have a system and a policy and processes for what you're trying to accomplish. So when you're looking at things that have gone wrong, you need to create an after-action report. Look to see if there's a system or a process or policy that was broken and that went wrong. And then if not, you can go through and see what needs to happen. Now, reminder, this is done after you've triaged. Create a policy or process so that you don't end up in the same situation. And when you have these sessions with your team, Jamie said it's not a blame session, but it's an accountability session, and it allows you to figure out how do you get better. Let's get into action items from Thursday's episode. When things go wrong, Again, you want to triage first. Pump those brakes. Make sure you inform your team members that if a complaint comes through, they stop and take no action until they talk to you. And you also need impulse control and to distance yourself from the problem and then come back to it. Get a giant 3M pad and diagnose the symptoms and the underlying conditions. Figure out the root of the problem and make sure that you're collaborating with your team so that you prevent this in the future. And create that after action report. Look at what went wrong, how did it go wrong, did someone break a system, policy, or process, or was something not clear? Lastly, Jamie said to remember, you can choose how you're going to react to problems that happen. That wraps up this week's recap. Thank you for joining me on today's Follow-Up Friday. Be sure to give us 5 stars wherever you're enjoying this podcast and share this or any of our episodes with another advisor or a team member who you think might benefit from listening. And until next time, happy planning.
Hold on before we go. Something that you need to know. This isn't tax, legal, or investment advice. That isn't our intent. Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice. Be a better husband, father, mother, and wife. The perfect RIA, the perfect RIA.